Good morning, everyone. My name is Gina Ford. I'm the Communications Director for Prince George's County Executive Angela Also Brooks. For the last few months, the county has been involved with mediation with the Green family, Mr. Billy Murphy and associates of Murphy, Falcon, and Murphy. It's regarding the shooting death of Mr. Green by a Prince George's County police officer, and today the county executive is prepared to announce the settlement agreement. First, we'll hear from County Executive Also Brooks, followed by Judge Stephen Platt, who served as mediator, Mr. Billy Murphy of Murphy, Falcon, and Murphy, followed by Shelly Green, daughter of William Green.
Police are given by this community an awesome and tremendously difficult responsibility of protecting life. They are also likewise given an authority that is not shared by any other in this community, and that is the authority to take life. That authority is given to the police by this community. It is a trusting relationship shared by the community and police, and when that trust is abused, it is necessary to take swift and decisive action. And so I'm joined this morning. I want to thank Mrs. Green, who's here, Miss Brenda Green, who is the mother of William Green. I am also joined by Shelly Green, who is the daughter of William Green, and William Little is here, the son of William as well. And I want to thank them for joining us. I also want to thank Billy Murphy and Malcolm Ruff of the Murphy, Falcon, Murphy Law Firm, who are present today. On the evening of January 27th, 2020, I received a phone call that I will never forget. The phone call came and said that one of our police officers had shot and killed a gentleman who was seated in the front seat of a police cruiser, that he was handcuffed, that his hands were behind his back, that he was unarmed, and that he had been shot 6 times. In the hours following that shooting, I also was invited to a briefing at our police headquarters where I learned that our seasoned use of force experts had spent the entire evening, had gone all night long reenacting this particular situation, reenacting the incident. They even had officers who sat in a car, handcuffed, and just went through various scenarios. And what they determined is that there was no reasonable way and no plausible explanation for how Mr. Green could have attempted to control the gun of Corporal Michael Owens. Now, as this community is aware, I became county executive after spending the better part of my career as a prosecutor. I spent 8 years as a prosecutor, later serving as state's attorney for 8 years. And some may recall that during that time, I personally tried 2 murder cases. And it was clear to me after that briefing that Michael Owens should be arrested and charged. I determined that he should not be treated any differently than any other individual who had just shot someone multiple times with no clear justification, as there are not 2 systems of justice. There was no reason, therefore, given the facts and circumstances as I understood them, for a protracted internal review. There was no reason to leave the Green family or this community with questions when we already had so many answers. And so with my full support, and in less than 24 hours of the shooting and Mr. Green's death, the officer involved in the shooting had been arrested and charged with murder by the Prince George's County Police Department. The evidence was clear that Corporal Owens needed to be arrested and immediately charged with murder, and a grand jury later agreed. Now, although this action was necessary, I have to tell you that it was not one that I took pleasure in. In fact, this was the first time in Prince George's County's history that we have ever charged an officer with murder for killing someone in the line of duty. While the criminal charges are still pending, I'm here this morning to announce that Prince George's County has reached a settlement agreement with the Green family for $20 million. Now, be clear, there is no price that you can put on the life of a son, a father, an uncle, a brother. There is no appropriate price tag to accompany a loss like that one. But we believe that the actions taken that night against Mr. Green and ultimately taken against his family warrant this settlement. To Brenda Green, Mr. Green's mother, I know this will not bring back your son. We've had this discussion just a moment ago. I am deeply sorry for your loss. I understand that this will not bring back your son, but we want to thank you, Ms. Green, for your grace. Thank you for your patience during this process, and we are accepting responsibility. To Mr. Green's children, Shelly and William, and to the rest of his family, we understand that this will not bring back your father. We understand as well that he was a loved one to many, but in Prince George's County, what I can tell you is that it is our belief that when we are at fault, we take responsibility. And in this case, we are accepting responsibility. I also want to be clear that there is excellent work that is performed every single day by the men and women of this department. Many of them serve this community with dignity and grace and courage. And so in the same vein, when it is warranted, we will defend our police department and the men and women who faithfully serve our community with honor and integrity. Let me be clear, where we need to take responsibility, and I've always said it, we won't hide from it, we will. When we need to defend our department, we will. And when we need to make reforms, we will. And that is why by executive order, I established the Police Reform Task Force, consisting of 23 individuals with diverse backgrounds to review our county's hiring, training, and use of force policies. I see Josephine Morning here. I want to thank her from SCLC, who is a part of that task force. Thank her for coming out today and for the love and attention she showed his family during this time. And that what we are doing today is we are doing what I've always told you we would do, to be transparent, to call a wrong when we see it. And I am committed to moving forward with the necessary reforms when they are needed. I welcome the fresh look and unique perspectives of the task force to ensure best practices, and I know that they are conducting the review in a deliberate and professional manner, and I want to thank that task force in advance. For this reason, when the task force came to me to ask for an extension of their timeline, I approved it. They will now conclude their work and submit their recommendations by December 4th. When I was serving as state's attorney, the first unit that I established was a unit called Special Prosecutions Unit. It was the first of its kind unit ever to be established in the state's attorney's office, and that unit is designed to investigate and prosecute police officers and other public officials who potentially commit crimes or abuse their oath of office. I established this unit to ensure that those entrusted to protect and serve the public were also held accountable when necessary in a court of law. As county executive, we will continue to hold those who step outside their oath accountable for their actions, and we will continue to work diligently to have a police department that our community and our police officers are proud of. To Prince Georgians, as I have said throughout my career in public service, we will be transparent and accountable, and while we may not always get it right when we are wrong, we will accept responsibility and work to correct deficiencies. And in the instances where it's not as apparent, we will defend the county while working to make improvements when necessary. Now I want to bring Judge Platt to the podium. I want to thank him for his work in this case, and he will address the process. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, my involvement as a mediator, while not unusual, and is my presence here is unusual for two reasons. One, all parties in a mediation in this have a right and expectation by law and by rule that all of their communications will be held confidential by both the parties, by their counsel, and by the mediator. Only because both sides, both parties, all parties in the Green family, Prince George's County at the county executive, have waived that right, and not only waived that right, but in the interest of the transparency that the county executive just described, have requested that I be here to explain the process that we underwent that ultimately reached the result and the settlement of this case. To the extent that some good can come out of something very bad, okay? That is why I'm here, to explain that process in a way that I hope the readers, the public, and the media will further explain. I think this occasion is historic for a number of reasons. Doing what I do, and this is not my first case involving the police department of this and other jurisdictions. Some of the names that have requested confidentiality will remain so. Let me just say that this is about the 10th case that I've done at least involving police departments and charges of excessive force and other charges more serious, including this one. I'll honor their confidentiality by not mentioning their names or so forth, but they would be familiar to the media if you heard them. I've looked around the country, and I preliminarily want to say that this process began and ended, and in between, was different than any mediation I've ever had involving the police or anyone else for that matter, in that what we were negotiating, if you want to call it negotiating, but what we were talking about was what's fair. And that is not always what we talk about. We being the county, we being the Green family, who were able to overcome their grief, their understandable grief and anger that I can't comprehend, in order to engage in this process. It took tremendous strength, and with the aid of their counsel, they showed that strength to me and to everyone else involved. I look around the country. I look at George Floyd, I look at Breonna Taylor, and I see cases that the government that's responsible did not step up, and in some cases still hasn't. This government stepped up immediately, without any hesitation, in the manner that was described by the county executive. Her involvement was instant in the manner that she described, even earlier than the mediation. And it was positive and it was productive, and the only issue for her, and I had personal discussions with she and her staff, was what is fair to the Green family and to this community of Prince George's County. The differences in this mediation are some, the ones I've just described, but I also want to give credit to counsel for both Prince George's County and for the Murphy Falcon law firm for the Green family. Without their assistance, without their support, this settlement was reached at a number. I was not there as a judge, I was there as a mediator, and there's a tremendous difference. This number was what was determined at the end of the day to be fair. This case compares, unfortunately, the facts of this case drove the discussion, and the facts were uniformly bad. More aggravating in some instances than the so far more high-profile cases that have gone on around the country. Again, the aggravating factors here were too numerous to uphold. There was an article about 2 weeks ago that talked about the evidence against this officer. That was the evidence that drove the result in this case, among others. And it produced, because all parties had an open mind, and all parties were not interested in theater, they were interested in fairness, and there is a difference. We were able to reach the result that we reached. The county executive pointed out there's no such thing as a price on someone's life, Mr. Green or anyone else for that matter, but in this case, the egregious facts that led to his demise produced no arguable defense. And the recognition of that by the Prince George's County government and the executive in making the decisions that they made is what enabled us to reach this result, which I think is fair to all. And that goal was the goal that we reached. I'm proud to have been a part of it. we live in somewhat alternative universes. You see that around the country. The world that this mediation encompassed for both the Green family and the county, at the end of the day, was reconciled. We won't forget, we won't forgive, but we can move on. And I'm extremely proud to have been a part of that. And the Green family continued throughout the mediation to express not only interest in the monetary settlement, but in the effort that the county executive described to reform the processes. And they will remain a part of that, I'm sure. The task force will take the time it needs. The Green family will contribute to their deliberations in a manner that certainly helped me understand what needed to be done and what could be done in this case, and more importantly, perhaps in the future, to keep there from being any more William Greens. So I want to thank everybody who participated for helping me help them reach a result that I hope will be viewed historically, particularly again in the context of what's going on in this country in these cases. And this jurisdiction, once again, and I have fond memories of it. I was here as a judge for 16 years, as a circuit court judge, 3 as a district court judge, and when I was an infant and orphans court judge. So I wish everybody the best of luck, and I, again, appreciate the involvement. Sometimes what I do is fulfilling, sometimes it isn't. In this case, it was, and I hope continues to be. Thank you.
I'm Billy Murphy, and standing next to me is Malcolm Ruff, who is a brilliant young lawyer with our firm. First of all, I want to thank Angela Alsobrooks for having the courage to do the right thing in this case. I want to thank Judge Platt for his amazing mediation skills, which played a large part in our ability to come up with an agreement that we both thought on both sides was fair. And most of all, I want to thank the Green family, because they are amazing. To know them is to truly love them. Malcolm and I both agree that we have never seen a family this close. We have never seen a family this engaged. At our first meeting, over 20 of them showed up at our office because they all are grieving about Mr. Green, who they call Boo Boo. And Boo Boo was the strength of this family. He was the rock that everybody leaned on. He was the glue that held everybody together. He was a wonderful person with a tremendous personality, and everybody who knew him learned to love him. It was mostly love at first sight because he had that kind of personality. This family has worked with dignity and has cooperated despite their tremendous grief with a process called achieving civil justice. The justice system has 2 components. One is civil. It determines what level of compensation people should get for their tremendous losses. And the other component is criminal. And in that situation, the determination is, did the person commit a crime? And if so, should he go to jail? And if so, for how long? We have finished phase 1, the civil justice phase. And now the family is awaiting the resolution of the criminal justice phase. And all along, all this family ever wanted was fairness. They didn't want revenge. They didn't proceed in anger, even though they were. They didn't proceed on the basis of purely an emotional response because they knew that that would not get us to where we are today. They were rational, fair-minded, sane, and reasonable. Now, from County Executive Alsabrook's point of view, I've known her for 8 years. I have watched her with admiration and respect. She is a gifted political leader. She is brilliant in the way that she understands and implements policy and in the way she treats other people. She's one of a kind. But she was saddled when she first came into public office as a prosecutor with a corrupt, racist, brutal police department that had a long history of it. On 2 occasions, they were under federal jurisdiction. And recently, they have come under scrutiny because of the racist practices that they have towards black officers. When she was a prosecutor, she couldn't deal with it like she can deal with it now. But now, she has an opportunity to reform the department. And we, both the family and Mr. Ruff and I, are anxious to participate in real police reform. Police reform of the kind that I haven't seen in my lifetime, and I've been practicing for 50 years. Police reform that will stop this from ever happening again. Police reform that will implement body cameras and punish officers if they don't turn them on when they're supposed to, or if they turn them off when they're not supposed to. Police reform that understands that across the world, 8% of the population is not fit to be a law enforcement officer, not temperamentally suited. But amazingly, 40% of the people who apply to be police officers are not fit. And so meaningful police reform screens them out with psychological testing so that they don't become police officers. We need that as well. There are a lot of other components to police reform that we will be working on with Ms. Alsabrooks. But we wouldn't be here today without cell phone video cameras. And we won't be here as a continuous process unless body cameras are uniformly implemented across the country. So, in this case, the takeaway is that the black life of Mr. Green truly matter. And the black lives of his mother and 2 children truly matter, because black lives matter. Black lives matter. This is a historic settlement. The number here reflected the heinous nature, the brutal nature, the senseless nature of what happened to Mr. Green. And in my 50 years, I have never seen a case this brutal, this senselessly brutal, this depraved, and this unjustifiable conduct. Never seen it before. And I've seen a lot of police cases. I've handled a lot of police cases. Now, Malcolm and I put in, easily 200 hours of research on the background of this officer. Malcolm says more. And what we found was that there was this terrible, terrible pattern in him of senseless, hair-trigger violence. We found out things about his background that were terrifying. And suffice it to say, he was one of the 40% who got through who was unfit to do the job. So again, I want to thank County Executive Officer Brooks. I want to thank Judge Platt. I want to thank this family. And I want to thank Mr. Ruff and the members of my team for the tireless work and effort that they put in to make this settlement happen. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over briefly to Mr. Ruff. Come here. Come here. You got to get used to this because you're a brilliant trial lawyer.
Well, I'll just offer this. It has been an amazing experience dealing with the grief that this family has had to go through. I was sitting in their living room on January 28th, and the emotion, the heartache was palpable. And I promised them on that day that we would give every ounce of our being to making sure that the legacy of William Green is never forgotten. And so I know that this family will go forward from today, and they will never let you forget, because William Green deserves to be celebrated. And like Billy said, his life absolutely mattered. And today is a message to law enforcement agencies and officers across this country that unlawful police violence against unarmed Black men shall not go without a severe penalty, and that our communities will no longer stand for this.
Amen.
Amen.
One last thing, if I may. What drove this settlement was the reality that if there had been a trial, the verdict could have been catastrophically high. And there was nothing that could be done to prevent that or minimize that, because the evidence against him was so terribly strong. And so, to all of those who may second guess the number, it would have been much worse if we'd gone to trial. And County Executive Officer Brooks realized that. And she realized that to make the right decision in this case, that would actually save the county money, that the time was now to come to an agreement so that justice could be attained that was viewed favorably by both sides. I'm a trial lawyer. I love going to trial. I've gotten bigger verdicts than this for police brutality. And I know what could have happened if we went to trial. But from the family's point of view, they didn't want to wait 4 years for a trial and 2 years for an appeal. They wanted justice as soon and as swiftly as we could get it. And so the county should be grateful. The members of the county government should be grateful. The people of this county should be grateful that Angela Alston-Brooks took care of business in a way that protects not only the interests of the family, but the interests of this county. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Shelly Green, and I am William's Green's daughter and his youngest child. Since January 27th of this year, my life has been flipped completely upside down. Losing my father has been the worst thing that has ever happened to me, and I can't imagine anything in the future that will hurt as badly as this. Words cannot express the pain, sorrow, and emptiness that we feel. My dad was taken from me on my mom's birthday. For the rest of my life, the same day I celebrate another year of life with my mom, I will have to share that day mourning my father as well. From the first breath I ever took, my dad was right by my side. He was always there. Now I'm left alone without him to figure out my life. I hardly sleep at night because that's when I think of my daddy the most. I know he is in heaven, watching over our family and smiling proudly that we have fought so hard to achieve justice for his murder. Often I pick up the phone to call him and remember he is no longer there for me to lean on. I worry for my brother because he has now had to step into the large shoes of my father to be the backbone of this family at such a young age. I look at my grandmother, whose eyes hold nothing but sorrow now. Her once happy personality is now gone. No mother should ever have to bury their own child. I know she wishes that she could just hug my dad one last time, but she never will again. And I know it has crushed her inside. William Green was loved deeply by his whole family. He was the glue that kept everyone together. He was kind, gentle, loving, and an all-around great man. He knew how to make people feel good. I could go on and on about my father, but at the end of the day, nothing I say or do will bring him back. So now I must be his voice. I must fight for justice for him. I must be the woman he was molding me to be. I must make sure you never forget his name, William Green. Our family would also like to acknowledge County Executive Also Brooks for working with us to achieve this settlement. It will never make up for the precious life of my father, and if I were able to choose, I would choose my daddy every time. But we will make sure that we use these resources not only to keep my father's legacy alive, but to also combat the evil of police brutality. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will now take any questions from members of the media. Rachel?
So the settlement in this case will come out of the county's budget, is essentially the answer, is that the county has to cover, this is a liability that the county will have to cover with its budget. Well, you know what, so I understand the underlying question, and let me just answer it this way, that this is a liability that we wish we didn't have. And, you know, if the question is how do we afford it, this is not the way that we want to spend taxpayer dollars, which is why we are doing everything we can to make sure we're never here again. The Police Reform Task Force, making sure that we review every policy, every procedure, and that it is my great hope that I never have to stand at another microphone like this one and announce a judgment like this. And so if that's the underlying question, I think that it's well-founded, that these are tax dollars that are spent on a judgment like this. Much like many of the other counties' liabilities, it will come from the county's funds. Well, the only promise we made in the family was really wonderful and wanting to work with us, is that they wanted to work with us. They came and said, this is not a matter of us just wanting to have a dollar amount. We want to make sure that we are able to participate in the systemic changes that the department will make, and Ms. Green made it very clear, and the rest of the family, that they wanted to be a part of the solution, that they wanted to work with our reform task force to give their suggestions and input, and we will make sure that they will be included and have an opportunity to address this reform task force. We're very concerned. I can tell you that we worked immediately following the murder of William Green, that I assembled a group and we looked to see how this happened. And what we were able to determine is that there was a loophole, that it existed for many, many years, that allowed Corporal Owens to collect workers' compensation while continuing to work, claim an injury, collect compensation, and did not report as he was required to, this injury, this ongoing injury to the department. So there was a loophole that allowed the company that worked on the workers' compensation claim to answer that claim, to pay him, without notifying the county that this was happening. And so this was a lapse in communication between the workers' compensation, the company that was handling it, and the county. And so the police department was not notified about Corporal Owens's workers' compensation, the nature of it, until it was too late. And so we have worked to adjust that loophole now, and to address many of the other issues that have come up, including what do we do to ensure that officers are fit for duty who have been involved in critical incidents. What happens with mental health care in our officers? How do we provide that health care in a way that does not allow an officer who continues to suffer a mental injury to serve in a way that harms the public? So those are some of the questions that we are now working through. But the answer is that we're working to make sure this does not happen again, and that we repair the deficiencies that this particular incident revealed.
Yes. There has to be external action requiring serious police reform, and there has to be internal action requiring serious police reform, interdepartmental action. The external action involves some of the things I've already said, but in addition, it definitely involves repealing the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. This is a rare statute that most states don't have, that gives the police extra rights that they can abuse so that investigating their behavior is much more difficult. This is a Bill of Rights that gives them collective bargaining rights that they don't have to earn, that taxes every police department in the state of Maryland and the cities that have to pay for that. This is a department in Prince George's County where there was supposed to be an early warning system that would have alerted because of the things that were going on in the way Officer Owens was policing, and there was not an adequate response to the danger signs that early warning system provided. So these early warning systems have to be upgraded and improved. And the most difficult thing, because if you haven't been screening police officers properly so that the bad apples don't get on the force to begin with, is getting rid of the bad apples that you have that escaped the proper screening. It's easy to keep them off, but it's very difficult to get them off once they have gotten on. Those are some of the things we got to do. I have a much longer list than that, but I don't want to take away from everybody else's time by giving it to you now. But we're happy to be involved with the county executive so that we can bring those things to fruition. I've been fighting for police reform my entire life, and there isn't much that has changed in 50 years. The rhetoric has not changed. The police behavior has not changed. And what that speaks to is that the black community has never in this country been in charge of how it is policed. From the beginning of our journey from forced slavery as Africans to the present time, we have been policed in a way that reflected the prevailing view that we are less than human. The police job from the beginning of all of this was to enforce slavery, was to be brutal so that people would stay in line, was to quash righteous slave revolts, was to quash escapes, was to maim, was to burn, was to hang. And this culture is deeply entrenched, even in today's department, which is why you see the curious phenomenon of officers doing the same old thing even though they know they're on camera and being recorded. It's because the culture of policing is so deeply wrong, so deeply racist, that getting rid of it is going to take time. We're going to have to roll our sleeves up. We have to be persistent, and we have to be resolute. And this is not the time for compromise about these fundamentals. We don't want to go in there asking for half measures. No, not now. Because there's enough of a majority in this country so that these reforms should be enacted swiftly by our state legislature and by state legislatures across the country.
Amen.
No. The department is not in a better place right now because these changes don't happen because somebody got fired. They don't happen without wholesale reform. And that hasn't happened yet. And there are many who are pessimistic and don't do what they're supposed to do to speak out and to work hard to make a change. I've never been one of those. And as long as we have brutality, and as long as it is unaddressed by civil justice, we'll take bad cops to trial and we'll hit them hard. And sometimes getting big verdicts like we've gotten historically is the only way to get police departments and city governments and county governments to listen and do the right thing. Because if you don't hurt them in the pocketbook, you haven't hurt them at all.
Let me just address one part of that. So Mr. Murphy and I agree on a whole bunch of things. Let me just, he just now offered an opinion about our police department. And let me just say this about it, is, you know, he mentioned that absolutely nothing has changed in the last 50 years. And what I should offer, I think is important in that there is no one size fits all. I don't think it's fair to compare our department to Prince George's County as a department that is its own department. And the truth of the matter is this, and this is an undeniable fact, is that the result that we are discussing here today would not have been possible in the last 50 years. What I am telling you is that this is a significant departure from how these cases have been handled. I don't think that it should be taken lightly that Corporal Owens was first held accountable by his own. Within 24 hours of this shooting, he was charged by his own. I think that's significant. That is how this started, is we came here because the night of this incident, I received a call that said, there's something amiss here. And this doesn't feel right. Let's come together. And less than 24 hours after Mr. Green was murdered, Corporal Owens was in custody and had been charged. That's significant. Now, it doesn't cure everything. It does not mean that we don't have other meaningful reforms that need to be made. But I think that it would be awful for us to walk away today and not recognize that there have been significant reforms that have already been made and significant sort of work that's been done in this department, including that led to a decision like that one. That there will be new leadership of this department, that we are in the process of searching for a new leader, that we have engaged many in our community. And these are varying voices who have volunteered to step forward and work with us to make sure that the meaningful reforms that we all agree should be made will be made. So I think it is important to say that this department is not where we're going to be, but we sure are not where we used to be, and that today, I think, signals that sort of real change that has to happen, and we will continue to do better. We will continue to do better. Well, I think, you know what, Judge Platt, and I think Billy Murphy spoke to it, is that there were many aggravating circumstances from a civil standpoint that pointed to the county's exposure and liability. And given all the facts and circumstances as they were presented, we determined that the amount agreed to in this case was a fair amount that was fair to the Green family and also was fair to the county. I'm sorry, could you say one more time, Brad?
The officer's bill of rights is
Oh.
being discussed. A lot of people make it. Where you come down on that?
I think everybody's going to be tuned in Annapolis. I can tell you that I've had conversations with both the Speaker and the Senate President, and that they are eager, and many others. We are led by Delegate Alonzo Washington is one of the chairs on this committee, for example, and we are looking forward to going to Annapolis and making some changes that everybody agrees have needed to be made for a very long time, and I will be a part of that process as well. I'm not a legislator, but I will certainly be there, Brad, making sure that I weigh in and that the county's opinion is shared.
Is your message given?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that, because I've said it, and I will continue to say it. I am not litigating a matter that is currently in court at a press conference. I'm just not going to do it. And I know that there's a great interest in having us do that. That matter is still in active litigation. It is not appropriate for me to discuss a matter that is in active litigation, and I'm just not going to do it. Now, there are important reforms that are being discussed. Again, Josephine Morning was here today. I want to thank her, who's a part of that task force. We welcome the input of the public. This is a process that relies not only on experts, but relies also on feedback from the public. We welcome that feedback, and again, the report will be given December 4th. So there is an avenue, there is a vehicle that can be used right now for the public to give us their input, and we want it. We want the input of those individuals who are more than welcome to come before that task force to testify, to give us their input and opinions and suggestions, but to continue to host press conferences and ask me to speak on a matter that is in court is inappropriate.
Final question?
Did you hear what she said? Mind repeating the question just one more time for them? I don't think that they're prepared to respond right now. I can tell you that I feel comfortable speaking just briefly on their behalf. As you can imagine, they've been going through a lot of emotions, grief, remorse, pain, anguish. Obviously, we are here because we've agreed to settle at this historic number, because it will do great things for this family going forward. And I believe Ms. Brenda, this woman is a pillar of strength. She deserves everybody's respect and attention, and well wishes and love. And so I'll give you Miss Brenda Green. Nikki Owens. Miss Owens is a cousin of
Mr. Green. Yes, I'm Miss Green's niece. For our family, honestly, this doesn't bring resolution. This doesn't bring justice. This doesn't bring peace. This really doesn't make anything better for us. We're still mourning the loss of William Green. We're going to mourn the loss of William Green for a very long time. This is hard. Losing someone in this way you don't go through the normal grieving process. Coming to this press conference was not easy for my aunt. This is like the day he died. So she relives this every time a George Floyd is killed, every time a Breonna Taylor is killed. My aunt relives this every single day. His children is living this every single day. So this judgment is necessary. This settlement was necessary for us to move on and move past this, but we still have a criminal trial to get through, and we still have a grieving process to continue. So this does nothing for us, but just closes this chapter and helps us move on to what's next.
All right, with that, thank you, everyone.